lovely listeners. Welcome to A Lift to Work with Tina.
And I'm Kate.
And we are both nurses and NLP practitioners and coaches. And we're offering you a lift to work. So hop in the back, and every episode we'll be helping you with our expertise to solve any issues that are going on for you.
Well, hello there, my beautiful Tina. How are you today?
I'm very well, Kate. Thanks. And yourself?
I'm all right. The sun is out. The pollen count is 9,000. So there's a high probability I will sneeze a lot during the podcast.
Well, welcome, lovely listeners, to A Lift to Work. Today, we're going to take you in a little red Corvette.
Oh, that's quite posh.
I know. I saw a film yesterday about Prince, so it's on my mind. You know that song, Little Red Corvette. I can't sing. I don't know why I even attempt to expose the listeners to this nonsense. I love
your randomness. You're even more random than me. I didn't even think that was possible.
Well, I'll try and focus now because poor old listener, you're probably thinking, what on earth is going on? Today's episode, you're going to love this because it's about tricky conversations.
I am actually really excited about this episode because... Oh, those tricky conversations that you know you're going to have, but you don't want to have, or when you get the knots in your stomach.
Yeah.
So we are gonna tell you how the best way you can deliver. Please.
And I think everyone has these in their life, don't they? That it's either maybe a friend that you have crossed a boundary and you think, oh, I do really need to talk to them about this, or it could be a work issue. Maybe it's an allocation of annual leave. You don't think you're going to get as much as everybody else. It could be something with your partner. It could be 100 children. It could be 101 different things.
But so the first question that pops into my head is, what makes a conversation a tricky conversation? So what's the difference between having a normal chat to having a tricky one? What makes it tricky or difficult? And I think it's the emotions that we attach to that particular conversation. For example, you may not want to upset anybody. If you're a sensitive soul, you're like, oh, well, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and I don't want them to not like me. I want to be liked. And I think it's the emotional and physical changes that we have that we associate with that conversation. What do you think, Tina?
I completely agree with that. And I think sometimes, as well as that, it can be the reaction you might have got from that person before. So you either imagine a reaction, like some of the things you said, they might not like me, or maybe they won't speak to me again. Or it could be that you've tried to speak to this individual before, or when you do try and have a tricky subject conversation with them, they get angry or they get annoyed, and that's a feeling that you don't like. You don't like people being annoyed at you, or you don't like people being angry with you. You find that a difficult thing to deal with. So I think it's kind of, like you say, it's all in the feelings domain, isn't it? Their feelings, your feelings. And I guess the other thing is consequences. So sometimes a bit of you knows that if you have this conversation with your friend who's always crossing boundaries, maybe I'm making something up here because I don't have a friend like this, but maybe you had a friend who never pays their way. So my sister used to have a joke, and it was like, they're the first in the pub and they're last to the bar.
Listeners, if you want examples of this type, you can go onto Reddit, because Reddit is brilliant for these kind of scenarios because they're on there all the time.
Yeah. It's a bit like you would have written in the olden days. You would have written to an agony aunt about this, wouldn't you? Oh, my friend never, we're always going out and she never pays her way, and I don't really earn very much and it doesn't seem fair, and I want to talk to her and I don't know how to broach the subject. So this kind of thing has been going on for eons. But the thing about consequences is part of you knows that it's possible that if you say this to that friend, that they will no longer be a friendship. And I guess if there was to be a consequence like that, then maybe that's just what it is. That maybe you aren't deserving of being in a relationship with somebody who doesn't pay their way, who doesn't value you in that equal kind of coming together. So yeah, that's the other thing I think that plays around with us is, well, there could be consequences, but there'll also be consequences of not tackling it, in that you could end up resentful over time, or it builds in your mind like a Greek tragedy, and you imagine that, it's just, it's getting worse and worse and you're getting more and more resentful. So actually it's not serving you not to tackle this.
No, and you get those physiological,
the
physiological responses, like you find yourself getting a high blood pressure, or your pulse goes a little bit faster, and your tummy grips in the middle, and you get that whole and actually you might find that this whole Greek tragedy that you have created is just a piece of Feta, because the other person goes, oh shit, sorry, forgot to pay. Oh, I swore, sorry everybody, forgot to pay. Here's the money. Oh my god, let me know if I do it again because I've got a terrible memory.
Yeah
And you're like, oh all right then.
Exactly. You just don't know how it's going to go, do you? And you build this feeling inside you build this fear, or you build resentment, and then you start behaving differently because you're like, oh, I'm so grumpy with them about what happened last August. And you're like, and the person's probably like, why are they grumpy with me? I don't understand. But you should have said something at the time. But if it's still burning in your soul, then you probably need to say something now. And so just leaning into the idea of having the tricky conversation, I think, is really, really helpful. And I talk about that Bridget Jones film. Some of you might have seen Bridget Jones and the big pants. I talk about putting your big pants on, your big girl pants, but if you're a gentleman you can put your big boy pants on, but you basically just need to gird your loins and do it. And
it's like, Tina, you've just said, it applies in so many different social and work settings. At work, you may be a manager having a conversation with one of your staff. It might be that you are said staff member who wants to have a conversation with their boss, which in itself can be quite a daunting prospect. Have you ever had those moments with your children where you're going to have you smell really bad? Not you, Tina.
Well, that's a relief,
because I can't smell you from the computer.
Because we do this podcast virtually, so if you could smell me, that would be really, really bad.
But like, how do you tell somebody that they have hygiene needs to be met without going, oh, you smell really bad? Because how are they going to feel? How would you feel if it was them saying it to you? Oh my word. Or again, your friendship group, or even you want to phone up and make a complaint about something, about utilities, bills, whatever. It can still be a challenging conversation to navigate.
And it's interesting, and sometimes I wonder whether there's a bit of kind of cultural reference here, because in some countries, in the UK, for example, you are much less likely to find somebody sending a meal back in a restaurant that's not right. And that's statistically been proven by somebody, that in other countries they just think, well, it's not right, and the kitchen would want to know it's not right, and the chef would want to be proud of their food, and I can't eat it like this, so they just pop their hand up and say, could this be changed? We just torture ourselves. I've been out with folks who are like, no, I'll just eat it. No, you can't just eat it. But the thought of putting their hands up in the restaurant and people are looking at them and they are making a complaint about the food, and oh my God, I'm drawing attention to myself, and this just, the whole thing just becomes a big thing. So I think you're right. It's just about thinking, right, I need to address this, because it's still going to leave me feeling a certain way if I don't. And kind of got an example of a colleague, let's call her Mary.
Mary comes up quite a lot, doesn't she, in our podcast?
She does, bless her.
Mary.
And if you're called Mary and you're out there, it's because we love the name. It's nothing you've done. So so she comes to talk to me and she says, I'm angry at the team leader because I never get my annual leave requests met, and it's just not right, and I feel really angry, and it's affected my relationship with them, and it's it's just not fair. And the first thing I thought was, well, a better reframing. So I said to her, never? You really never?
Funnily enough, that's the first thing that I thought of when you said that. I was like, never? Or just sometimes?
So you're right. You're absolutely right. So what we did was we looked across all the requests made in the last year, and 2 out of 5 hadn't been met. And I said, so why do you feel like so strongly about this? And she said, well, the 2 she didn't met were really important. The 2 she didn't meet for me were really important because there were family things going on, and there was a special reason why I wanted that time off. And the others that she said I could have, I wasn't bothered either way.
But did she voice those requirements when she put her request in?
No. So that's what we got. That's what we got to find out. So I said, so from her point of view, when she was giving out the yes or no to the request, did she understand how much emotional importance you had to those requests? They were over and above the others, really, in a way, in your mind. No, because everyone should just get their requests. I said, well, let's have a look at language, because the language is, it's a request. It's not a requirement. She doesn't have to give it you. You're requesting it. So if it's so important and you can flex in other ways, you probably need to talk about that with her too. So we spent the rest of the time kind of talking about how she was going to have this conversation. And I think through doing that, what came up was quite a list of tips that I think everyone can use. So that's what Kate and I would like to share with you now, really. A little list of tips to have a tricky conversation.
And sometimes it's the smallest thing that makes the biggest difference. And again, with these types of conversation, a very quick thing that you can do is to not assume that you know how that other person is going to respond, because you don't, do you? You may have had, I know, Tina, you said earlier about somebody that has been had quite a fiery and angry response. But what sort of day were they having at the time? Had it been a good day? Is this their normal? Or was it an off day? And has something really, really nasty or horrible happened to put them in that frame of mind?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know.
And I think it's so helpful what you're saying, because in NLP, what we know, and I mean, it's in lots of communication workshops, is a lot of communication isn't the words. I mean, a whopping 55% is body language. So when you're about to communicate, you know, how are you coming across in that way? How is the person you're about to communicate looking from a body language point of view? If they're gritting their teeth and pulling their hair out, it's probably not the right moment.
Yeah, because whilst conversations need to be had, there is a time and a place.
Yeah.
Absolutely, a time and a place. And it's thinking about the most appropriate for that situation. Let's say, for example, obviously we're nurses, so I'm going to put this in a nursing context. You need to have, as a boss, you need to have a conversation with a member of staff, but an arrest has just come in and they're in the middle of sorting. Now is not a good time. And actually, the amount of times I've been pulled out of situations that I shouldn't have been because I was smack bang in the middle of doing something really important.
Yeah.
You're like, no.
Yeah.
Really?
I know. Oh. And the way you set it up, it matters a lot. So if you were to say to somebody, have you got a minute? And that phrase, it's not helpful in lots of ways, because it says, I am only deserving of a minute. This will only take a minute. And a minute is, you know, in a minute we can solve whatever. You know, any conversation that's tricky is not going to take a minute. So don't say to somebody, have you got a minute? So it's much more helpful to say, do you have some time for me? I'd like a conversation about something important. Now might not be a good time, but perhaps 10-15 minutes of your time would be great. So be a clearer that you need a slot. And someone who's busy in the middle of something, Kate, like you were saying, might say, well, not now, but, you know, come back at 4. So there you go. So, you know, you know you're getting each other's full attention. And 38% of what we talk to each other about is in our tone of voice. And people just, it takes them a while to get that. So, I mean, I once said to somebody, your tone today is not as helpful as your usual tone. You said, what do you mean? She said, all I said was, can I help you? I said, you didn't say it like that. You didn't say, can I help you, in a warm, can I help you kind of way. You said, can I help you, in a, why don't you just get lost kind of way. But they're the same words. But, you know, if you were writing a report and saying, I don't understand why the client wasn't happy because all I said was, can I help you? It doesn't capture the tone. It's just the words. So be attentive to your tone when you're about to have a tricky conversation. Try and soften your tone and think, you know, I'm going to say some things that might be difficult, but I'm going to try and do this gently. I think that's kind of helpful.
Yeah.
And be prepared. So just think, right, you know, I know this is tricky. My mind's whirling a bit about it, but I'm just going to write down some keywords just to help me remember what it is I want to say. So I think that's a really good start.
Well, listeners, you know that I'm a list maker. I do well with a list, just because it helps to focus, and it's easy. I have been on both the giving and receiving end of tricky conversations, and I do tend to, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I do tend to go off on a bit of a tangent, and actually all you want is the facts. Right, so what's this about? You know, why are we having the conversation? But we're starting, we start with the why.
Yeah.
Don't we?
Yeah.
Why are we having the conversation?
No, that's absolutely spot on, isn't it? You know, try and find a private space if you can. If you're out with a friend, having coffee is probably, you know, sort of nice environment, but somewhere private, especially for a tricky conversation at work. And as you say, starting with your why and your why. So not a you statement. Okay, so I'm coming to talk to you because you've been unfair about the off duty. It's not a great starting place. Kate, I want to talk to you because I feel uncomfortable about the off duty and it's something that's important to me, is a much better place.
Yeah, because the ownership, who has got the ownership there?
Exactly, I have, because I'm saying it's about how I feel. Yeah.
And listeners, this is a really, really good hint and tip, is to, this isn't about making it all about you, but it's the ownership. It's the I feel this way, or I am thinking this is how it makes me respond.
Yes.
As opposed to, you make me feel like this.
Yeah.
You should have done that.
Yes, because it's immediately going to make me feel defensive, isn't it? Because Mary, our lady's going to talk to her team leader about the off duty. If Mary is in a good place and she can start with, I've come to talk to you about the off duty allocation. From the 5 last requests, you've given me 3 and I didn't get 2, but the 2 I didn't get were occasions that were really important to me, and I take responsibility for not letting you know that. But it's left me feeling that, can we find a way to make off-duty allocation a little fairer? Is there anything we can do so I'm not left feeling like I haven't been able to attend family events that are really important to me?
Yeah, and it's finding that final point, isn't it? What is essentially, you want to know, what's the point of the conversation? What is your desired outcome? Because tricky conversation is not a rant.
Yeah.
A rant is just you giving all barrels.
Yeah.
And that's it, full stop.
Yeah. And I think the fear of a rant, the difficulty with a rant, is why it makes me a bit uncomfortable, is it tends to then go into generalizations. So you tend to move away from the facts. So like you were saying at the beginning, keep it to the facts of this particular instance, not you always do that, you always XYZ, you never, because they're all big generalizations. And the first thing the person who's listening is doing is thinking, well, I could think of many times that I didn't do that. I can think of several examples when I wasn't like that. Yeah. So it becomes argumentative. Whereas if it's just about last Tuesday, when I went out with you, I paid for the meal, and that, and I prefer us to share the costs. Very specific.
Yeah. Just and Mary, if we're going back to Mary could have had, without coaching input and insight, Mary could have gone into that conversation and gone, you never give me my annual leave, la, 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 I missed out on this because of you, and rah, 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 rah. Full stop.
Yeah, you always give Kate everything she asks for. You always give all the others what they want. So, it becomes really argumentative and uncomfortable very quickly. So absolutely specific, factual, stick to your point.
Yes. And listen to what the other person has got to say, because we're talking about conversations, and conversations as a general rule are two-way.
So exactly. So, use your own words. It's not a script as such, so whatever other words you would normally use, once you've set the scene and what the conversation is about, you can say, Kate, what are your thoughts on that? Or what, is there any, what would your response be to that? Whatever is your words. Absolutely giving them a space, because I like what you said earlier, otherwise you might make massive assumptions. And you want to know their truth and their angle, don't you?
Yeah. And giving the other person the space to listen. It's about listening, assimilating, and waiting for a response.
Yeah.
Because that's how we know we're being heard. When somebody does respond to what you've got to say, unless sometimes you live in my house when it goes, huh? What? Oh no, I want listening. So repetitive. When somebody repeats what you've said, that's when you know that brain has been engaged and they've listened to what you have got to say.
Yeah. And it's really powerful. You know that phrase that they used to use about children, like, you need a good talking to. Those kids need a good talking to. Often what those kids need is a good listening to.
Yes.
And often what we all need is a good listening to. And so what you say is such truth. And and I think like when you kind of towards the end of conversation, if you do a bit of summarizing is a posh way, but if you just scoop it all up and you go, so I think what I've heard, Kate, is you feel uncomfortable about the off-duty allocation. There were a couple of times that, you know, it didn't go the way you hoped for. And I have explained that, you know, if I know something's a particular priority for a member of staff, I will absolutely try my best to make sure that one is you know, put through. And I didn't at the time know that had extra importance for you, so I'm sorry you're disappointed, and da-da-da-da. And we've got to a place where we've agreed in the future this and this.
Yeah.
So helpful.
Yeah. And listeners, again, this is coming back to you to think about. So think about tricky situations or tricky conversations that you've had. And whether it was you that was on the receiving end or leading that conversation, think about how it went. And with the information that we've given you, how could you have done things differently? So knowing now what you do, what differences would you make?
Yeah.
Because that's, you know, that's what we're here for. We want you to think about things differently. What language would you have used? Or what, you know, for the next one, what language will you use?
Yeah.
What approach will you take? And let's take, for example, we'll put Mary aside just for a sec and think about the friend who hasn't paid you back. You're really cross about it. Grr. How will you start that conversation? You know your friend, so you know the tone that you can use, that kind of stuff. But think about the responses that you might get. I know we don't want to anticipate, but actually, do you know the facts?
As you say, because that could go in so many different directions, couldn't it? It could, and if you take compassion and grace into that conversation and think, you know, I'm here to discover, because I don't know. I am annoyed and I'm absolutely allowed to be. However, I really want to seek to understand what's going on with my friend. If it's a regular habit, then why is it a regular habit? And like you say, you will get into that conversation with them by raising the subject. And it could be that they have debt that they are too ashamed to share with people, and they really, really struggle to pay for anything. But they don't know how to say to you, please, let's stop going to the posh places that are a bit more expensive. I'd rather you came round to mine and I cooked your tea. And so you might never get into that aspect of the conversation unless you raise it. They might just be forgetful and in the middle of the menopause. They might just be a person. That's another podcast, by the way, you can look at. So, you know, there might just be a person who you know, is money to them is really important. They find it hard to spend it.
Yeah.
And they didn't realise it was disrespectful not to pay their half. So there's all sorts of possibilities, aren't they? And you're absolutely right, Kate. You just don't know what's sitting behind it unless you explore.
So we would love to hear your comments from this podcast. Any thoughts, any tidbits for us, things that you've done that have been successful, that actually you think that worked really well for me. Maybe it'll work for other people, because this is all about the sharing of knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah. And our own, and share your experiences, please, because other people read your comments as well that listen to the podcast. So, you know, everyone can benefit from each other's knowledge and experience. So that's fantastic. So go out there, have your tricky conversation. You could relabel it even if you like. What could we relabel it? So have your enabling conversation. You're
because it's all about words, isn't it? You say tricky.
Yeah.
Tricky implies hard. Hard implies, oh God.
Yeah.
Where's our mood gone? It's a negative, isn't it? So change it to a positive.
Yeah. Because bridging, you could say, this is my bridging conversation where I'm going to get from where I am now to some other place.
Oh, I like that. A bridging conversation.
Yes, I might take that up myself. Well, it's been lovely chatting to you all, and we'll see you in our next episode. But take care,
guys.
everybody.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. To A Lift to Work, please subscribe, share with your friends, and follow us.
Make your comments below. So this is a quick disclaimer from us that just says that whilst we are registered practitioners, if you have listened to anything that has caused a trigger, or you feel like you need medical attention or support, please go and see your GP or other registered healthcare professional.
Absolutely, because this podcast is for educational and fun reasons. Thank you,
Lots
everyone.
of fun.
Bye.